I'm going to end with a couple of basically questions that I'd like to throw out for the consideration of the audience, and hopefully we'll get into in the Q&A period. One of them is, how do we, I've talked about urbanization, others have talked about the sort of question mark that looms over the ability of Africa to generate the kind of growth that it needs in order to employ profitably the huge numbers of young people that the continent is producing. How will Africans be educated in the future in these urban environments? I think this is one of the great challenges of our time. I think this is a great opportunity for the United States, which has a university system or a collection of universities that is the envy of the world, that this is in a situation with no magic solutions, being able to do something transformative about Africa, the African education environment, I think is the single greatest catalyst in terms of providing solutions to other sets of problems that we've spoken of here today. The other one is industrialization, and this brings us to a topic that's loomed over many of our conversations today and that involves a lot of my own work personally. Others have mentioned China and its role in the continent. I am a person, I'm going to have to do this in a telegraphic way because of time, I'm a person who thinks that all things being considered, that the arrival of China on the scene in Africa is a good thing, that having choices, having a variety of partners, having partners competing for your attention in life is a good thing. And so Africa is, because of China's renewed interest in the continent, finds itself in that position. But much like I said with demographic growth, China also poses some problems for Africa. And one of the major problems I believe China poses for Africa is industrialization. That China, having arrived at the moment that it did in the history of globalization, at becoming the sort of factory floor of the world, with the economies of scale that it has, with the amount of capital that it can wield, has come to dominate a number of the industries or sectors that we typically think of as the sort of entry rungs into the process of industrialization. And so Africa faces, this is not because China's evil, this is not because Africa is some preternatural victim, this is just the way history unfolded. And so how do African countries, given that they are small sort of cookie cutter balkanized markets that don't have large populations, that don't have large markets, that don't have access to huge amounts of capital, how do they enter into the process of industrialization, having followed on the footsteps or on the heels of China with its immense advantages in this regard, is another of the great challenges that we're going to face in the next decade or two. Because as Africa's population increases, as Africa urbanizes in the way that I have described, if Africa cannot industrialize, the boom in services that has sustained African growth so far will not suffice in order to sustain African economic growth in a way that Africa needs to grow in the future. Thank you.